All right, let's get started. Hello, welcome to an adventure, everyone. Yeah, things are, I have no idea why. Anyway, how is everybody? I hope that you're doing well. The stream today decided to be recalcitrant. Thank you. There we go. That's much better. OBS and I and the stream and I had a difference of opinion. I saw the stream as working. OBS and Google Chrome saw the stream as not working. First, OBS told me, hey, I don't know what this virtual camera thing is that you're trying to turn on, but that ain't gonna work because I've never heard of it. Okay. So that required me to completely close and reopen OBS to get it functional, which the way the setup works, I have to use that in order to get the output over to Stream 2. And then once I had that working, Chrome refused to recognize that the virtual camera existed. And I had to completely close Chrome and reopen Chrome. So, slight delay in getting going. Yeah, tech issues. Like, I had literally just hit go live, and then I was like, wait, that's not the starting screen. Why is it just my camera showing? Like, OBS was showing the starting screen, but backstage of the stream together was not. Anyway, I got there. It just took me a little bit to juggle all the things and restart everything, basically. I hope that you all are having a good Wednesday. Welcome to an adventure, an archival adventure. This is a once-a-week program where I, your local, global, I don't know, the Community Collections Archivist here at Virginia Tech, I share random things from the archives. Most of the time I've never seen them before, and we learn together. This stream presently goes out to 2 Twitch channels, twitch.tv/VTUL Studios, which stands for Virginia Tech University Libraries Studios, and twitch.tv/Rogan27, which is my personal account. And Universal, yes, I'm a Universal Community, whatever, Community Collections Archivist. Anyway, hi. We are going to get going. It is presently at my desk quite warm. So if you hear some fan noise, there's a reason. It is presently 76.5 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 24.7 degrees Celsius with 67% humidity at my desk. Not ideal for the collections, also not ideal for the human body. I have a fan blowing on me. It's going to stay on. It's honestly exhausting, and it's been like this all week. It's pretty bad right now. I could lower the humidity by bringing in a dehumidifier, but that would bump the temperature about 10 degrees. And I don't really want to be in here at 86 degrees. So, like I said, I hope that you're having a good start to your day. Let me see who else here. And I believe captions should be working in all of the planned ways. That was another thing. OBS had an update, and right now, while I do have the WebSocket server set up so that captions should automatically, like, you should be able to use the captioner overlay, but you should also be able to ignore that and use the built-in closed captioning. I can't guarantee it because usually I have a doc in my OBS that shows me what's coming through on that captioner, and that doc has completely disappeared. So I don't know. But anyway, let's see. Lord Portico, it is great to have you here. Key Squared, hello. Bit Rebellious, hi. Sterling, hello. Thank you for dropping the shout out to the VTUL Studios channel. And yes, at some point, once I have time, which time is like the most precious resource. Once I have a moment to catch my breath, I have thoughts about how to get live streaming to both Twitch channels and both YouTube channels at the same time up and running. I just haven't had time to mess around with it and test it and see if I can get it to work. The one time I thought I had it set up, the YouTube stream never went live. So I have other thoughts, but I just have not had a chance. Anyway, hi. We should look at some archives stuff. If you all have any questions about things as we go along, do let me know. I'm happy to, talk about archival practice or anything like that. But since we're going to be looking at history, and I'm at a historically white university, it's prudent to pay attention to the history here. Virginia Tech acknowledges that we live and work on the Tutello and Monacan people's homeland, and we recognize their continued relationships with their lands and waterways. We further acknowledge that the Morrill Land Grant College Act of 1862 enabled the Commonwealth of Virginia to finance and found Virginia Tech through the forced removal of Native nations from their lands in California and other areas in the West. Virginia Tech acknowledges that its Blacksburg campus sits partly on land that was previously the site of the Smithfield and Solitude plantations owned by members of the Preston family. Between the 1770s and the 1860s, the Prestons and other local white families that owned parcels of what became Virginia Tech also owned hundreds of enslaved people. Enslaved Black people generated resources that financed Virginia Tech's predecessor institution, the Preston and Olin Institute, and they also worked on the construction of its building. So we just like to pay attention to that as we get started. I haven't actually typed the command in a while, so but Hannah appears to not be here at the moment, and she's the one that has typically dropped that in chat, so we got it for you. It's there. So how about we talk a little bit about what are we looking at today? This one, I should be able to spell better. Haha, yes. So, if you have viewed the stream in the past, if you've been around for some previous episodes, you might be aware that I had been reading through a Civil War era journal, the Philip Peltz Journal. Peltz was the chief engineer of the USS Dakota in the Union Army Navy in the American Civil War. It was the Union Army Navy at the time. Anyway, as far as I know, but correct me if I'm wrong. Anyway, it was the Navy, the Union Navy. We encountered an entry in that a couple months ago that talked about the Union Army Aeronautical Service. And we spent a very brief couple of minutes, like 15, 20 minutes at the very end of stream, talking about Civil War Air Force used in the American Civil War. And so that is, I was like, we need to look more at this. That's exciting. I want to know more. So today, Civil War Aeronautics. We are going to be looking at that Union Army Aeronautical Service. We are going to be looking at the Confederate Army forces and their endeavors towards using air units. They didn't have a name. Like the Union officially had the Union Army Aeronautical Service. I think that was the name of it. We'll confirm for sure as we go along. Like they had an official unit. The Confederate Army had similar technology, but they didn't have a formalized military unit. So there's not really a name to call it. Regardless, what we have available today, you can see here in the list of items, and there are links on here that you can visit if you want to dive into the specific finding aids. But it looks like we've got the Eldon E. Billings collection, the Fanny Tinsley Memoirs. Looks like a folder from the French family correspondence. One or two things maybe, I don't know, from the Guy to Carlo Jr. papers, as well as an item from the Rare Books collection. And the item from the Rare Books collection notes in its subtitle, with a survey of military aeronautics prior to 1861. So maybe that's a good place to start. We can look at, what was Air Force like prior to 1861? And then we can talk about, as the chatbot command says, up and away in our beautiful balloons. Because Civil War era Air Force means hot air balloons. And I'm excited. Hi, Pretty Witchery. You should be asleep, but hi. I know it's not always possible to sleep, and I know that you're taking care of yourself and you'll let yourself fall asleep if you need to. So yes, I'm going to start with aeronautics in the Union and Confederate Armies. I'm actually going to move this whole endeavor over a little bit. You can see here, this is published in 1941. It's not really that old. I mean, it is. 1941 is still 80 years ago-ish? I can't do maths. I can. I don't know, like 83 years or something. This is apparently a dissertation submitted to the Board of University Studies of the Johns Hopkins University in conformity with the requirements for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. So F. Stansbury Hayden, this is their doctoral dissertation, apparently. But what I'm interested in from this, mostly, because we've got other sources for the Union and Confederate Armies, what I'm really interested in here is the survey of military aeronautics prior to 1861. So, and you can see here, gift of Eldon E. Josh Billings. Actually, you can't see because the camera decided to not focus. It was gifted to the library by Josh Billings. Let's see. Congratulations, Key Squared. You've been randomly selected as a VIP for the stream. Enjoy the digital diamond next to your name in chat. We may be referring back here. There's an entire glossary of abbreviations and symbols. I'm sure I won't know most of them. What I want to do is get to the contents here. Military aeronautics prior to 1861 starts on page Arabic numeral 1. And there's illustrations. Yeah. Illustrations are always better for the stream. Okay, I'm going to zoom in a little bit so that you all can have some larger text. But I will read it, because I do that. Military aeronautics prior to 1861. Although air observation as a branch of military science is generally associated with recent advancement in the field of modern tactics, the use of balloons in warfare is not of recent origin. The earliest public suggestion of employing balloons with armies in the field seems to have been made in France shortly after the beginning of practical experiments in aerostation. The brothers Montgolfier demonstrated the first successful balloon at Annonay near Lyon on June 5th, 1783, using heated air for ascensive power. The experiment was closely followed by that of the distinguished physicist J.A.C. Charles and the brothers Robert, who sent aloft the first hydrogen balloon from the Champ de Mars in Paris on August 27 of the same year. Some 3 weeks later, Joseph Montgolfier repeated his demonstration at Versailles before the court of Louis XVI, sending up on this occasion the celebrated sheep, duck, and cock that have been known since as the first aerial passengers in history. A sheep, a duck, and a rooster, apparently, were the first creatures sent up in a balloon in the late 1700s. Thus far, the balloon had been proved to be a practical reality, but no human being as yet had ventured aloft. On January 15th, Jean-François Pilatre de Rosier, the first man to go up. I have no idea what that accent was. It's just how those words came out for me. I have not practiced any of these names because it's the first time I've ever seen that name. Jean-François Pilatre de Rosier, the first man to go up, made his initial ascension from the Faubourg Saint-Antoine in Paris. While repeating his experiment several times on the 17th, he was accompanied by André Giraud de Villette, who seems to have been the earliest recorded advocate of aerial reconnaissance in warfare. Villette was apparently much impressed with his experience and immediately foresaw the military possibilities of the new invention. On October 20th, he wrote an account of his ascent to the Journal de Paris, in which he pointed out the advantages of a balloon to an army and added that the apparatus might also be useful for operations at sea. Thus, the idea of employing the balloon as an implement of war was publicly expressed within 4 months after its invention and within 5 days after the first ascent by a human being. Hey, it didn't take them long to do the typical human pastime of invent new science, use for war. Out of curiosity, I now have to see if we happen to actually have copies of the journal, the Journal of Paris, in our collections. Fun fact, Charles's law on the behavior of gases when heated is still part of first-year physics curricula. And that would be the self-same J.A.C. Charles. And that makes total sense. Somebody associated with a like first principles physics understanding associated with heating gases makes total sense for hot air ballooning. Okay, you don't have to bounce. Thank you, camera. We'll get there sometime. Journal de Paris. We probably don't have it, but sometimes we have random things in our collections that I wouldn't necessarily expect. Yeah, it doesn't appear that we do, although it does appear to be available online. But only for the year 1784. In the entry that I'm finding. So, whatever. I'm not going to dig it out, but just stood next to my office with your earbud in. It's really funny. The delay is just barely out of sync from my voice. It should be roughly like a 3-second delay. Just standard. That, I think, should be what it's set for. Anyway. Villette's suggestion was succeeded in less than a month by that of an Englishman who published a pamphlet in the following November, in which he called attention to the military value of the newly invented aerostatic globe. I love the early names. Hot air balloon. Aerostatic globe. Very good name. He discussed the potential utility of the apparatus in warfare and advocated for its adoption for reconnaissance in land and sea operations, as well as for long-distance signaling. The following year, an author of unknown identity, I love this, I'm sure there's a citation here, but, did you try putting VTUL Studios in one earbud, Rogan in the other, and then walking by? Lord Portico, that would be frightening, because that would be too much of my voice. I wouldn't be able to stand it, but most people aren't terribly fond of their own voice, so. An author of unknown identity published in Paris a remarkable tract also recommending the use of balloons in military operations. This writer went so far as to predict wide changes in the methods of warfare as a result of the adoption of such tactics, indicating the advantages to be secured from such a new type of war equipment. He included in his program of proposed air operations reconnaissance and observation, map-making, and captive aerial scouts to protect a moving army from surprise. Another volume from the pen of an English air enthusiast appeared in 1784, in which was proposed a scheme of aerial signaling not unlike that designed by T.S.C. Lowe for the Union Army during the American Civil War. The author Thomas Martin discussed the feasibility of employing pyrotechnics with balloons in accordance with prearranged codes, and asserted that such a system would be of great value in war, particularly with fleets operating at night. In a lighter vein, oh dear, as though in anticipation of Major Nicholas Lamond's fantastic scheme 24 years later of invading England with a fleet of troop-carrying balloons, a broadsheet containing doggerel, which foreboded such an event, was hawked in London the same year that Martin's suggestions appeared. Interesting. Okay, so as early as 1784, people were already talking about using hot air balloons in the way that the Union Army ended up using them. And that's not long after, because what was the date? 1783 was like the first demonstration of a successful what was the term? I don't remember what their fancy term for hot air balloon was. Aerostatic globe. 1783 was the first successful demonstration of an aerostatic globe, and they sent up a sheep, a duck, and a cock in the balloon. They were the first creatures to go up. And by 1784, they were already talking about using it in ways that the Union Army would end up employing during the American Civil War. That's interesting. Oh, I'm going to skip ahead to page 5 here. We're only skipping a little bit. But the outbreak of the French Revolution, followed by war on a large scale, eventually paved the way for a real trial of the balloon in military operations. In the spring and summer of 1793, the young French Republic faced its most crucial period, confronted with foreign war against powerful adversaries, as well as with internal disorder and rebellion. The revolutionary government was naturally willing to adopt any means that might, in any degree, contribute to victory. At such a period, proposals were considered seriously that probably would have been ignored by conservative war ministries in more tranquil times. During the crisis of 1793, the advocates of military balloons again came to the fore, this time to receive attention. Early in that year, Louis Bernard Goitin de Morveau. Louis Bernard Goitin de Morveau. Sorry. Sight reading some of these names. They use spellings and sounds that are not comfortable in my mouth because I haven't encountered them before. Frequently pointed out to Lézère Carnot, future director of the French armies, the infinite usefulness of balloons to the Republican forces. About the same time, Joseph Montgolfier, co-inventor of the apparatus, urged that they be used for dropping explosives. He later presented a plan for the reduction of Toulon by dropping on the city bombs of immense size and weight. Okay. Oh boy. The reduction of Toulon. Nice euphemism there, huh? All right. So it seems like the first time that they were actually used for military purpose was the French Revolution. Interesting. I want to find, there are supposedly illustrations in this book. I'm going to locate some illustrations. Come on. I lost the table of contents. That's what happened. And rather than having you watch things go in and out of focus as I flip pages under the camera, I'm just going to try and find the illustrations. List of illustrations. Louis Bernard Goitin de Morveau. The name that I just butchered is apparently plate number 1. Where that's located in this volume, I don't know. Oh, the illustrations are all at the rear. So basically, I had perfect timing in trying to go and look for illustrations because the very first illustration pairs up with the section that we just read. There's the Colonel. Wait, that doesn't... No, that's plate 2, sorry. There. That's Louis Bernard Goitin de Morveau, an early advocate of military balloon reconnaissance. French Revolutionary Wars, 1794 to 1798. This comes from a print held by the Library of Congress. Just gonna look at some of these. Balloon entrepreneur. Okay, this balloon is essentially named Enterprise. If I'm... Yeah. Entrepreneur. Essentially, the name of this balloon is Enterprise, just in French. During the Battle of Fleurus, June 26, 1794. From a copy of an original watercolor by Nicolas Conte, again from the Library of Congress. The tradition of naming vessels Enterprise. I wonder how far back it goes, because apparently it goes back to at least June of 1794, during the French Revolutionary War, or the French Revolution, and I don't know. I would imagine it probably goes back further. Letter. Oh, it's in French. There's no way I'm going to read this. Le chef de brigade, directeur de l'École nationale aéronautique. All right, the chief of the brigade, director of the National School, the National Aeronautics School. Citoyo. Yeah. My 6th grade French skills are not going to do this for us. My 6th grade French skills are slightly better than a typical 6th grade French skills because they were supplemented by 3.5 years of Latin and a year of Spanish after that, but still. We're getting some... This is going to be interesting to have on hand, I think. We don't know yet about these people, but we've got photos of some of the Union Army aeronauts. Or, I mean, a photo and a drawing. I'm kind of excited to learn. Okay, do you want to know especially what was I just saying about the naming of vessels? Very dramatic mustache. Him. That's TSC Lowe. That is the man responsible for getting the Union Army to use hot air balloons during the American Civil War. Just a moment ago, I was commenting on how the photograph that we had of or the drawing that we had of a French hot air balloon during the French Revolution was a hot air balloon that in French was named Enterprise. This, from 1861, in this photo from Cincinnati in April of 1861, is the inflation of the balloon Enterprise for the Union Army. See, the reason, so I know that enough of my regular viewers are fans of Star Trek. Ohio, the not very final frontier. I mean, but I know, as with the reference to the final frontier, that a lot of you are Star Trek fans. And if you are familiar with the series Star Trek Enterprise, during the opening sequence of that series, they do this like time lapse that sort of shows illustrations of various ships named Enterprise, starting with, I believe, sea vessels and onward. I don't remember if there are hot air balloons included in that time lapse sort of evolution of the technology as it displays all these ships named Enterprise. I would be curious to go back and find out, because indeed, Enterprise was one of the very first names given to one of these aerostatic. Nope, I've lost the phrase already. What was the phrase again? Aerostatic spheres. Was that what it was? I know it was aerostatic. Aerostatic globe. I think that was what it was. Well, I'm not going to dig for it, but hot air balloons. I'm going to put this one aside. We can, I'll look through and see regarding like, as we progress, if there are images in there that align with the things that we're looking at, I'll pull them out. But I want to make sure we actually move on from the book to some of the other things I have. So, ooh. Okay. I don't know what all Sterling's got for me, but let's see. I've got folder from Guy to Carlo. I've got some letters from the French family. Billings. Fanny Tinsley. That one seems okay. Don't know where I want to start. You did this so long ago that you don't even remember. I mean, part of the reason there was such lead time is that it takes time to put together an episode. But also, it was partly because when I was putting together episodes, I didn't want to remember everything when I came to looking at it, because it's like sort of in an unboxing style. And so when I was doing all of the pre-prep myself, Even if I had skimmed through and like looked at stuff to try and get a sense of would this work, by the time the episode came around, it had been like a month, and so I didn't really remember what was there. All right. So this, as you can see, this is a manuscript, a typed manuscript, by E.E. Billings. I'm not certain. I'm gonna look up the actual finding aid. Let's see. Because I don't know who E.E. Billings is. So I'm gonna pull up the finding aid for me. It's E.E. Billings. Biographical note? Eldon E. Billings collection. Do we really not have a biographical note at all? Interesting. That is unusual. There's no historical note and no biographical note. All right, this collection contains subject files, clippings, memorabilia, and artifacts related to the American Civil War. There's 7 series, 5 of which predominantly contain Civil War materials. The other 2 series in the collection also contain files on other subjects of Billings' historical interests, including aspects of military and United States history. So he was a researcher of some sort. I know nothing about this man. And there is no note. If anybody knows who Eldon E. Billings was, I would be curious to know more. Let's see. Aeronautics in the Civil War, a critical analysis. We won't read the entire thing, but let's see what he says. Despite the fact that the French had used balloons for military purposes in 1794, when the world's first military balloon corps was formed in 1830 and again in 1859, and had even maintained a school to train aeronauts for that corps, in America, the employment of military aeronautics had remained practically unknown before the Civil War. Okay, so between 1794 and 1861, what conflicts was the United States involved in? I'm looking up a list. List of wars involving the United States. The War of 1812, that would make sense. All right, so between 1794, 1794, okay. So just 11 years after the end of the American Revolution, it would have been the very end of the Cherokee-American Wars. The very end of the American-Algerian War? I have never heard of the American-Algerian War. I didn't know the United States was at war in the late 18th century with Algeria. Or Algiers? Yeah. I had no idea. Now I'm very curious. There was the Quasi-War. Let's see. Versus between the US and Great Britain against the French Republic and Guadeloupe. But then we get into, let's see, the First Barbary War. Tecumseh's War. Tecumseh's Confederacy? A confederation of Native Americans in the Great Lakes region of North America, which formed during the early 19th century around the teaching of Shawnee leader Tenskwatawa. Okay, so another of the American Indian Wars. The War of 1812. The Creek War. Second Barbary War. A number of conflicts, apparently. The First Seminole War. The Arikara War. Okay, a lot of these are the American Indian Wars. The Winnebago War, the Black Hawk War. This is a good list. The Second Seminole War, Texas Comanche Wars. Although that overlaps in part with the Civil War. Mexican-American War. That might be like the big one. Let's see, the Cayuse War, Apache War, Navajo Wars. Oh my! This one is called Bleeding Kansas. The list of wars that the United States was involved in, when you're looking at the early 19th century, is a list of all of the indigenous nations that the United States squashed. Puget Sound War, Rogue River Wars. Okay, I'm just gonna, lots of indigenous. Second Opium War? Apparently, the United States, France, and the British Empire were at war with China between 1856 and 1859. Utah Wars. The Utah War, part of the Mormon Wars. Okay, there's a lot of American war history that I'm completely unaware of. I'm very curious now. The Raid on Harper's Ferry, I know that one. Cortina? Paiute, and then we get the American Civil War. So a number of conflicts where they could have potentially used hot air balloons and did not. So it's a well-taken point that between the time that the French were using it for military purposes and the American Civil War, America had not bothered to use balloons for military purposes. And it's a significant period of time where they were basically fighting everybody. So that's an interesting point. It's true that the science of penetrating and navigating the upper air had been attempted with some success. Thomas Jefferson had experimented with fairly large balloons as early as May 1784, while hydrogen balloons and envelopes were flown at the College of William and Mary in 1786. The first ascension in the United States by a person was that of Jean-Pierre Blanchard at Philadelphia, January 9th, 1793. Benjamin Franklin was the first American to suggest the use of balloons for military purposes, referring to the subject in a letter of November 1783. Several months later, he suggested the use of balloons as a weapon for invasion. Philip Freneau seems to be the only other colonial American mentioning the possible military utilization of balloons. The Seminole War in Florida produced the first official recommendation to employ balloons with American military forces. Colonel John H. Sherburne in 1840 suggested to Secretary of War Joel Poinsett that balloons be assigned to American forces in Florida to track down the elusive indigenous people. A balloon should be attached to each column operating against the indigenous people. Ascensions should be made at night, locating camps by observing campfires and plotting their location. It's smart. I mean, if you were in a mountainous area, you would send up scouts up to higher elevations to do the same thing. Although Poinsett thought well of the idea, the commanders in Florida did not approve, and the conflict ended with no use of the balloons. Interesting. I like that we're getting like the history of this. We'll definitely be looking at some technology stuff in a minute. During the Mexican War, John Wise, a well-known aeronaut, a well-known aeronaut? Okay, somebody want to look up John Wise and share? A well-known aeronaut proposed the capture of Veracruz, reducing the fortress there by means of percussion torpedoes dropped from captive balloons. Hi, Key Squared, yes. And yes, that's the Poinsett whom the poinsettia plant is named for. Oh, really? I didn't know the poinsettia was named after a person. Apparently, his proposal was never answered by the War Department. Okay. Civilian ballooning progressed steadily prior to the war. Okay, so civilians were familiar. Charles F. Durant became the first professional aeronaut being active in Baltimore and New York, retiring about 1840. John Wise, one of America's foremost aerial pioneers, who was to be active during the Civil War in 1835, began a long and distinguished career. James Allen, who, along with his brother, later served with distinction in the Balloon Corps of the Army of the Potomac. We have a photo of James Allen. I know I saw it. Let me see if I can find it here. Also, Whipple. Oh, it's not a photo. It's one of the pictures that we were looking at a moment ago. It's the illustration. That is an illustration of James Allen, aeronaut, Army of the Potomac, from a drawing in the Division of Aeronautics, Library of Congress. Thaddeus Sobieski, Constantine Lowe, with an impressive name, and one of the youngest. Wait, what? I'm confused. James Allen, who, along with his brother, later served with distinction in the Balloon Corps of the Army of the Potomac, began his activity. Thaddeus Sobieski Constantine Lowe, with an impressive name and one of the youngest, but today the best known of the early aeronauts, was beginning a lifetime of scientific study. Okay, the guy's full name is Thaddeus Sobieski Constantine Lowe. The line break threw me for a second. Okay, first I'm gonna look up who is this John Wise person? Because apparently well known, although I've never heard of him, but granted, I've never looked at this topic before. Sorry, John Wise. Balloonist. John Wise, balloonist. And as you can see, yes, this is a Wikipedia article. February 24th, 1808 to September 28th, 1879, pioneer in the field of ballooning. Made over 400 flights during his lifetime and was responsible for several innovations in balloon design. His balloon, the Jupiter, carried 123 letters to make the first official airmail delivery for the United States Post Office in 1859. And apparently this was him. Cool. Okay, so what was this other person, this very famous person that I've never heard of before? Thaddeus? TSC Lowe. That's, I didn't piece it together. It's TSC Lowe. Who we had this picture of, that with the very amazing mustache to go with the lengthy name. There's TSC Lowe. Thaddeus Sobieski Konstantin Lowe, American Civil War aeronaut, scientist, and inventor. Mostly self-educated in the fields of chemistry, meteorology, and aeronautics, and the father of military aerial reconnaissance in the United States. By the late 1850s, he was well known for his advanced theories in the meteorological sciences, as well as his balloon building. Among his aspirations were plans for a transatlantic flight. Which transatlantic flights by balloon, as well as around the world balloon flights, have been done mostly once balloon technology got significantly more sophisticated. His scientific endeavors were cut short by the onset of the American Civil War, for which he offered his services performing aerial reconnaissance on the Confederate troops for the Union Army. In July of 1861, Lowe was appointed Chief Aeronaut of the Union Army Balloon Corps by President Abraham Lincoln. Though his work was generally successful, it was not fully appreciated by all members of the military, and disputes over his operations and pay scale forced him to resign in 1863. Lowe returned to the private sector and continued his scientific exploration of hydrogen gas manufacturing. He invented the water gas process, by which large amounts of hydrogen gas could be produced from steam and coke. His inventions and patents on this process and ice-making machines made him a millionaire. He later moved to Los Angeles and built a 24,000 square foot home in Pasadena. And he opened ice-making plants and founded Citizens Bank of Los Angeles. And then he went into the railroad business, apparently. Fascinating. The photograph here reminds me of there was a Wizard of Oz movie. Was it Oz the Great and Powerful? I feel like they could have used this as inspiration for the styling in that movie. Anyway. When Lincoln called for volunteers in 1861, Rhode Island's 1st Regiment answered the call. You don't hear a lot about Rhode Island with regard to, like, I mean, yeah, they were involved in the American Civil War, but you don't really hear tons about them. Attached to the force was James Allen, well-known New England aeronaut, who, with his 2 balloons, became the first military balloonist to take service with American troops. The records are vague regarding his exact status. His aeronautical material was officially attached to the regiment, and dentist and amateur balloonist W.H. Helm was a volunteer infantryman who, because of his specialized knowledge, was authorized to take part in any aeronautic operation that might be undertaken with Allen's balloons. Thus, Allen's 2 balloons were the first used for military purposes in the United States. Allen's first ascension appears to have been June 9th. That would have been 1861, where he's reported to have reached an altitude of 5,000 feet. However, his career was unfortunate. All of his major attempts failed, so that he left the service to return in 1862 and serve under Lowe, then to head the Balloon Corps during Lowe's illness in 1862 for a short time before its demise. This is really interesting. Anyway, I still don't know. I don't know who the person is whose manuscript this is. What was his name? E.E. Billings. He's the guy that I think donated this book to us. I don't know who he is, though. There's no biographical note. I'm going to look and see. Oh, what was his... It's Eldon. Eldon Billings. Eldon E. Billings. There is no wiki page for him. Let me see what I can find. I like that one of the very first results that comes up is our collection. It's not super helpful because our collection does not include a biographical note. Actually, 3 of the first things that pop up. There's a JSTOR item. Does this have any information about him? It does not appear so. Apparently, he was associated with the Columbia Historical Society. Edward Eldon Billings. That, I wonder. Because if that is his actual name, then that was... No, let's see. Civil War and Conscription. Hang on. I may have found something slightly useful. I don't know, though. Description? About this issue? Don't you hate it when the search results give you a overview and you get to the page and you can't find where that overview came from? I don't know. Apparently he was also he was part of the Legislative Reference Service at the Library of Congress, but I have no I don't know about him because our finding aid does not provide that information. He appears to have been knowledgeable about the American Civil War, and this is a draft of something of his. We can poke at it again later on if we want, but I want to make sure I look at other things. Let's see. Guy DeCarlo Jr. has some stuff. Maybe I'll luck out and Guy DeCarlo will have a biographical note. No! T-squared. Thank you for being here. Hopefully your errand goes well. All right. Guy DeCarlo Jr. Let me see. Biographical note? I'm amazed and astounded. I'm actually really confused. how do these not have biographical notes? It's part of the standard, I mean, it's part of our current standard. That's not what I want. Do I not have... I'm going into our internal system right now to see. I can do it much faster over here. Two-factor identification. I'm just double checking because this is the second one I pulled up where it's like, sorry, no historical note, no graphical information, and it's just unusual. So I'm looking to be sure. Josh Billings, we have a portrait of this person? Apparently we have a portrait of him somewhere. Probably in the room with me. Although it doesn't list the shelf location. No information. No idea who he is. I'm very curious, and Sterling's gonna love what I'm gonna say next. I'm probably gonna ask Sterling if he can put together a biographical note for these collections, since they're named collections and we don't say anything about the person they're named after. Right, we have the Guide to Carlo, Civil War research papers. Nope. No biographical or historical note for this one either. So strange. And this one, at least we know, I don't know. Do you know anything about this one? I don't know. Whatever. I'm gonna look at the materials. I'm sad I can't give the context of like who was the person that pulled these things together, but maybe in the future somebody will be able to have that information, because now I'm gonna like Sterling's gonna get to research both of these people and write biographical notes about them. You send messages too quickly for Twitch? All right, we have a newspaper here. This is not contemporary to the American Civil War. This newspaper is from August 19th, 1956, from the Dixie Times-Picayune States Roto magazine. And so this image here is Northern troops inflate observation balloon Intrepid. Similar to the Union, in which Professor T.S.C. Lowe ascended at Ball's Cross Roads, Virginia in 1861. So yes, this is an image of them inflating the Intrepid. I said, in my spare time, and LMAO, and Trish said they didn't send because they were sent too quickly. Oh dear. when cannon first blazed at airmen. This is interesting. So this photo here, it says photo from in camp and battle with the Washington Artillery of New Orleans. The Washington Artillery of New Orleans engaged in an artillery duel. In this etching was one of crack Confederate outfits in the war between the states. As noted, this comes from the Dixie Times-Picayune. And in the South, in the former Confederate states, it is and was common to refer to it as the war between the states. Which can be strange about efficient typing, that's true. The Yankee balloon observer went aloft after the first Battle of Manassas to take a peek at the Confederate positions and found himself staring down the mouths of the Washington artillery's guns. I'm assuming that this continues on this other... Yes. So this is part of a research file, as far as I can tell. So it's got, like, this newspaper article was clipped out. Hi, Hannah. It's good to see you. Oops. I went to pick up the weights, and they're heavy. I didn't get a good grip. By Lieutenant Colonel Willard L. Jones. Come on, let's item down. Oops. Historian of the Office of Chief of Military History, Department of the Army. I think I'm in just a little bit too far. We're fine, though. It's not a huge deal. The official statement of the United States Army proclaims that its anti-aircraft artillery originated October 10th, 1917 in France during World War I, but a closer look at history reveals that the Washington Artillery of New Orleans probably inaugurated American anti-aircraft fire during the American Civil War. To say a closer look is putting it lightly. The story is all but buried in the official records of the Union and Confederate Armies, published in 1899 in William Miller Owens's In Camp and Battle with the Washington Artillery of New Orleans, 1885, and in the yellowed papers stored in the National Archives and the Library of Congress. That the target was not an airplane, but an observation balloon is immaterial. It was an aircraft used in war. That's a point well taken, actually. The balloon service, oh gosh, we're going to get some history. Hey, go figure. We're on an archival adventure, and we're getting history. The balloon service was started with the personal encouragement of President Abraham Lincoln. The need for such a service was shown soon after that war started. The Union Army had marched forth from Washington, D.C. to try to scatter the Confederate forces massed along Bull Run, a stream that ran little more than 20 miles away at Manassas, Virginia. On July 21st, 1861, a Union Army returned much quicker than it had started out, with the Confederates in hot pursuit. The victors pushed down the Potomac River and even threw shells at the lock houses along the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal in Maryland, within earshot of the Union capital. Rumors ran through the Blue ranks that General Joseph Eggleston Johnston was massing his men for an assault on Washington. Sorry, my reaction to that is the name just just super familiar being here at Virginia Tech. And it's like a name that I had not been familiar with prior to getting here. Although I don't believe that's who the residence hall is named after. Eggleston Hall. Yeah, Joseph Dupuy Eggleston is who it's named after, but it just struck me as, because Joseph Eggleston Johnston, and then there's a person, Joseph Eggleston, who is part of Virginia Tech history. He was one of Virginia Tech's former presidents. Anyway, complete distraction. Let's see. Joseph Eggleston massing his men for an assault on Washington. George Brinton McClellan, commander of the Union forces, had no idea of where to maneuver his disorganized troops to meet the threat. Where the question that worked up more sweat than the August heat was, where are the rebels? To get an answer, McClellan sent Professor T.S.C. Lowe and his balloon across the Potomac to Arlington, Virginia. Professor Lowe had shown the practicality of aeronautics in military service by experiments in and around Washington earlier in the summer. The Army employed him to construct a balloon of the best India silk containing about 2,500,000 cubic feet of gas, the first substantial war balloon ever built. Before his own use of balloons for military observation from the air, Professor Lowe knew of only 2 instances of their employment. The first was at Fleurus, Belgium, during the French Revolutionary Wars in 1794. The enemy shot at the balloon, but it was not clear whether the fire was from artillery or small arms. The second instance was at Solferino, Italy in 1859. Again, the users were the French. So this map shows the positions of Lowe's balloon at Ball's Crossroads and the Confederate battery at Munson's Hill. So we haven't quite gotten to that description yet. We'll look at that in more detail once we do. This is actually a really good little article here. In each case, the balloon was on the side of the victors. Unfortunately for Professor Lowe and the Union, however, the Washington artillery broke the chain. As minor an engagement as it was in the overall picture of the war, the first recorded use of cannon against aircraft in the history of the United States was a Confederate victory. Professor Lowe decided to ascend at Ball's Crossroads, Virginia, on the torrid afternoon of August 29, 1861. It didn't take him long to find it an unsettling flight. And just for my edification and reminder, the actual definition of torrid is very hot and dry. We got lost. On Munson's Hill, scarcely 2 miles away, a Confederate artillery battery was in position. More particularly, the professor was looking down the throat of an enemy 6-pounder. I want an image. Nope. So, an enemy 6-pounder would be the M1841 6-pound field gun. This is a 6-pound cannon employed by the Confederate Army. The distance from Ball's Cross Roads to Munson's Hill is 3,960 yards. Because the Washington artillery did not have a cannon believed capable of that range, there has been some doubt that the New Orleans unit could have fired upon the balloon. The balloon was raised from a point south of Ball's Crossroads. However, and tests of Confederate field pieces at the Aberdeen, Maryland proving grounds have indicated that these cannon could fire a greater distance than contemporary range tables gave them credit for. Lowe had aroused the most pugnacious instincts of artillerymen. Gunners always have taken a dim view of anyone who spots their carefully selected positions, since this is usually a prelude to counter-battery fire, besides being a source of valuable intelligence of the disposition of the rest of their force. The immediate reaction, therefore, of the artillery Lowe saw was to try and knock him out of the sky. This is what the Confederates proceeded to do with a will. Lowe didn't know then, and much less cared, but he was looking at the guns of the 2nd Company of the Washington Artillery, composed of the cream of New Orleans, well-to-do, for the most part, self-equipped, and adventurous men. They were commanded by a 23-year-old Virginian and a former West Point cadet, Lieutenant Thomas L. Rosser. The young officer was to change from the artillery to the cavalry and rise to wear the wreathed stars of Major General before the peace. At Munson's Hill, he made anti-aircraft history. That his rifled 6-pounder was not designed for use against aircraft did not deter him in the least. He opened fire. He later wrote a friend, "We fired at the enemy's balloon with one of our rifled guns a few days ago. It was pulled down immediately and has not been sent up since." 2 prisoners taken the night after the report that the ball came within 10 feet of the thing and frightened Lowe almost out of his senses. In his own account, Lowe wrote, "The enemy opened their batteries on the balloon, and several shots passed by it and struck the ground beyond. These shots were the nearest to the U.S. Capitol that had been fired by the enemy." The professor was excited. His use of the word batteries proves it. Careful research has not established that any battery except Rosser's fired at him or was in range to fire. The net result was that a very nervous Lowe let the gas out of his balloon and retreated to Washington. For about 2 years, Lowe continued to use his balloons for observation. The Confederates continued to shoot at them. A study of the Federal Air Service gives details of hundreds of flights, usually at altitudes of 1,000 to 1,400 feet. Union General John Porter took an involuntary ride over the Confederate lines when his ground crew was so upset by the enemy fire that they let Porter's balloon get away. The wind was from the north, and Porter got a much closer look at the gray positions than he had bargained for. I like the way this is written. It's got some style. A moving aerial target was too much for the crude fire control systems of the 1860s, and fortunately for the general's peace of mind, a shift of wind brought him safely back to the Union lines. During the war, the Confederate artillery used calibers up to 64-pounders trying to knock the enemy aircraft down, but quartermaster records show that all northern balloons were still in one piece at Appomattox. In any case, the Union finally quit using them. As one critic put it so succinctly, they drew fire. This is cool. It's so neat. I'm just fascinated by the hot air balloons. I had never, before we did this, before we saw the reference in the journal I had never considered Air Force in the 1860s. Okay, so this is, yep, on the Potomac. Washington, D.C. is there. The observation balloon went up here at Ball's Crossroads. Off the top of my head, my guess, I'm gonna look. I'm curious. I'm guessing that's Ball's Ford Road today. But Rosser's battery was down over here. Apparently considered to be too far away, over at Bailey's Crossroads, which Bailey's Crossroads I know well. Okay, so Ball's Crossroads is in Arlington. And it's not, it's Glebe Road. And it's, the historical marker for it is at the intersection of Glebe Road and Wilson Boulevard. It doesn't look like there's actually a main road that follows the path that the road did back then. There is a Balls Ford Road up there, but which is why I thought maybe it would be relevant, but it wasn't. And then, of course, we have a picture of our mustachioed, very, very, very extensively named Professor T.S.C. Lowe, or the Aeronaut, as he was usually called, in favorite position, standing on terra firma, after his balloon was fired upon by artillery. He continued, however, to use the balloon for about 2 more years of the war. I don't know who wrote this article, but it was by Lieutenant Colonel Willard L. Jones, historian for the Office of the Chief of Military History, Department of the Army, 1956. He's a good writer. It's got, his sense of humor shows through, and just enough detail, with a little bit of levity. It was an excellent article. The nation's most historic airport, Richard E. Byrd Flying Field, city of Richmond, site of 3 Civil War battles. And here's T.S.C. Lowe again. Professor Thaddeus S.C. Lowe and staff, 1862, inflating. It's that same image of the Intrepid being inflated. Let's see, some. It's got descriptions of the battles, but not a ton. At a quick glance, I didn't see a ton on the ballooning, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time. Ooh, this looks interesting. This appears to be like an advertisement from a magazine. Oh, it's not. It's an article from a magazine. Apparently, it's a book-length feature, which means we won't read the entire thing. But America's one-man Air Force. When the guns started firing, Professor Thaddeus Lowe thought his balloon observations could help the North. But he had to beat down the Army brass, call for Lincoln's help, and become the most shot-at target in the Civil War to prove it. What is this from? I have never heard of this magazine. When is this from? Well, it's urging getting polio vaccinations, so that gives some hint as to when. The name of this magazine is True, the men's magazine. But I don't see a date as to when this was written. I've never heard of this magazine before. 2, 3, 4. It is apparently a rather lengthy article. Written by somebody named Al Stump. So it's long, which is why I wanted to look up like what magazine it was in case people wanted to like try to find it if they were interested in reading it. But I've never heard of this magazine. True magazine, also known as True, the men's magazine, was published by Fawcett Publications from 1937 until 1974. Known as True, a man's magazine in the 1930s, it was labeled True, #1 men's magazine in the 1960s. Peterson Publishing took over with January 1975 issue. It was sold to Magazine Associates in August 1975 and ceased publication shortly afterward. High adventure, sports profiles, and dramatic conflicts were highlighted in articles such as Living and Working at 9 Fathoms, Search for the Perfect Beer, How to Start Your Own Hunting Fishing Lodge. Interesting. Sadly, without knowing the date of the specific magazine issue, Wikipedia comes through. One of the selections from True, the very first one at the end, examples of their articles, one-man Air Force. I don't know if this is... Oh, no, it's not. Oh, I thought it was going to be it, but it's not. Apparently, they had another article titled One Man Air Force in 1944. Anyway, I don't know what year this is from, but I'm sure somebody, if you really want to find it, you should be able to search through listings of articles from True, the men's magazine, to find America's One Man Air Force by Scott Hart and Joseph Millard. So, also, hi, Paul Stryker. I want to see. It's actually really dense as far as it doesn't have a lot of like illustrations. There's a transcription of a letter. Oh, we're going to talk about the Enterprise. Because I have to. Because it's the Enterprise. How can I not? Let's see. I want to see where I'm going to start. Wow. Okay. I think we'll read this in a second here. Oh, hello. Hi, Vance. Did Jules Verne use the Civil War air balloons as part of his plot for Mysterious Island? I'm not familiar with Mysterious Island, so I don't know. He didn't. Okay. Hi, Vance. It's good to see you. And hello, welcome in, everybody. 16-bit Eric Whimsies. It is good to see you all. Welcome to Archival Adventures. I am known here on the Twitcherverse as Rogan27. I'm the Community Collections Archivist here at Virginia Tech. And this is a once-a-week show that I do from the archives and special collections, where we look at materials from the archives, most often things that I've never seen before. And today's topic is Civil War era, American Civil War era Air Force. And we've already had two hot air balloons named Enterprise. Since you all are coming in from the home of a very prominent Star Trek Adventures role-play game GM, I just have to point to multiple early military balloons named Enterprise. Hi, Pretty Witchery. Please do get some sleep. And hi, Blue Rooster. Yes, and for anybody who is here and not already following 16-Bit Eric, you should. He's amazing. But welcome in, everybody. So this is from the French Revolution, the Battle of Fleurus, Belgium, June 26, 1794. And the balloon here is Entreprenant, which is essentially Enterprise, but in French. And then, hang on. Sorry, so many pages. This image here is inflation of the balloon Enterprise, Cincinnati, April 20th, 1861. This Enterprise was part of the Union Army Balloon Corps during the American Civil War. Jules Verne did use Confederate balloons as a device to get his characters to the island. Vance, that is really interesting. I was generally not aware of like Civil War era Air Force, so I'm sort of geeking out a little bit over. What? Whoa. Are you? What? Sorry. Like I said, sort of unboxing style, because you get reactions, because I haven't seen this stuff before. This is from the magazine. Okay, there are pages in this research file from Guy DeCarlo Jr. I have no idea who he is. There's no note in the finding aid, so I don't know who he was. Apparently, he was interested in the Civil War and had material about Civil War aeronautics. This illustration is by Tom Lovell, and it appeared in an issue of True, the men's magazine. Sadly, none of the pages say the date of the issue of True. So sometime between the 1930s and 1974, when this magazine was published, this article appeared. It's a long article. There's no way we can read the whole thing, but this is an amazing illustration. It's depicting Confederate forces firing cannon and rifles at a Union hot air balloon. That is an amazing illustration. I love that piece. Oh, it's gorgeous. Sorry, I'm just fascinated by all of this. I wanted to read, so there's a section in here, a short, I don't know, I'm going to read part of it, because it's about Enterprise. Let's see. Where should we pick this up? let's see. To discuss his ideas, he went to see his booster, Professor Henry, at the Smithsonian. There, a messenger caught up with him bearing a note from Chase. You are to see President Lincoln this evening at 8:30. It is all arranged. Lowe shouted in triumph, You'll come along and back me up, won't you? He asked Henry. I'd be pleased to. The meeting was memorable. Cameron was there, so was the gouty General Winfield Scott, now known as Old Fuss and Feathers. The nicknames of military personages in the American Civil War were quite interesting. Scott was commander-in-chief of the Union armies, but he was 75 years old, and his military thinking had frozen in the Mexican campaigns long ago. He laced liver-spotted hands across his belly and dozed while Lowe explained his proposal excitedly. A balloon corps would be the eyes of the army, he asserted. With my portable generators, it could follow the movements in the field, ever ready to ascend. The telegraph in the basket would be able to flash every movement of the enemy to our own army commanders and to the War Department itself. The cost would be low, the value immeasurable, gentlemen. Lincoln, Cameron, and Henry nodded, impressed. Scott belched and went back to dreaming of the terrapin and wine he had had for dinner. I'm sure there's some poetic or authorial license happening in the way this is written, but I want nothing taken on faith, Lowe said. My balloon is here, and I am prepared to demonstrate it. If I may have the use of telegraphic equipment and men to help with the balloon, I'd be happy to stage a public exhibition. Abraham Lincoln reached for paper and pen. I want to see it. I'll authorize the War Department to cooperate with and supply whatever is needed. Lowe went out walking on air. He could hear Scott's grumble of scorn, but he was not disturbed. The old man's days were numbered, and a new kind of army was in the making. The demonstration was set for June 18th, a week later, 1861. Lincoln's order cut red tape, and there were no delays in setting up the ground station on the lawn of the Columbian Armory. The American Telegraph Company supplied a sending key for the balloon and a reel holding a half-mile of fine silk-covered wire. They also sent crack telegrapher Herbert Robinson to ride in the basket with Lowe and tap out the messages he dictated. The task of inflating the Enterprise was begun the evening of the 17th from the gas main at 3rd and Massachusetts, to the disgust of his ground crew. Lowe handed out brooms. I want every inch of space swept and swept again, he insisted. The tiniest pebble could wear a hole in the bag during inflation. Toward morning, the job was completed, with 20,000 cubic feet of gas tugging against the 4 ground cables. The 100-pound ballast bags of sand hung from their snap rings around the basket, and extra weights were suspended from the rigging. Then, a little before dawn, with excited crowds filling the street behind, the balloon was walked carefully to the armory. As the sun lifted over the sprawling city, Lowe and telegrapher Robinson scrambled into the basket and took a firm grip. Stand by the cables, Lowe cried, lifting one hand. He glanced rapidly over the crew and the gear in a last inspection. He brought his hand down sharply. Send us up! The Enterprise shot aloft, its cables squealing through their anchored pulleys, the reel of telegraph wire humming. Robinson crouched at Lowe's feet, anxiously tending the wire. But there were no jams, and it paid out from the ground smoothly. Looking down, Lowe could see the crowds filling the streets and the White House lawn, and for a moment, he looked straight down at the rotunda of the Capitol. Then he lifted his telescope and swept it around the vast circle of his sight. As at his feet, the telegraph key clattered, and the sounder tapped a response. Robinson looked up. Ready to send, sir. Lowe cleared his throat and dictated a dispatch that was to make history. Balloon Enterprise. Washington, D.C., June 18, 1861. To the President of the United States. Sir, this point of observation commands an area nearly 50 miles in diameter. The city, with its girdle of encampments, presents a superb scene. I have pleasure in sending you this first dispatch ever telegraphed from an aerial station, and in acknowledging indebtedness for your encouragement for the opportunity of demonstrating the availability of the science of aeronautics in the service of the country. T.S.C. Lowe. That's as far as I'm going with this, but it's fascinating. Looking like the book-length article from True Magazine came out sometime in the 1950s. The only time I'm seeing book-length features in the table of contents on the Internet Archives, or possibly late 40s. Thank you, Hannah. If I can find it relatively quickly, I'll include a link to it in the VOD. Let's see what else we got. Because we are technically at time, but I'm gonna keep. We've only got a few more things to look at. Oh, apparently, this research file from Mr. Guy DiCarlo Jr. Apparently, he was a colonel in the Confederate States Air Force. Except there was no such thing. This is a humorous honorary designation, or meant to be humorous at least. Because while the Confederate Army did employ balloons, they didn't even have anything formal enough to have its own name. The Union Army had the Union Army Balloon Corps, which eventually over time developed into the Air Force, the United States Air Force. The Confederate Army used balloons for reconnaissance, but not as extensively, and they didn't have a formalized group, so it never really had like a name. But this is from October 13th, 1976, presented by this, I don't know. It was given at Hogwaller Air Base, it says. Know you hereafter that Guy DiCarlo Jr. has proven himself a true cotton-picking rebel by eating 3 meals a day of turnip greens, black-eyed peas, grits, chitlins, and mint juleps, and whining and dining our southern belles on hush puppies and corn liquor served in Dixie cups. He is hereby appointed a real rank colonel, whereby it will be his duty to stay ready for emergencies by saving all Confederate money and corn cobs, to recognize a damn Yankee, no matter if and he's wearing Bermuda shorts or a Union suit, to stay on guard for carpetbaggers, boll weevils, and scallywags, and fly regular slop dumping missions over Northern Territory. So it's a joke certificate from the 70s. Reading it, like, it's written in dialect, which is actually not as challenging to read as I had expected. But yeah, I don't know. I'm really curious as to who this guy was. I don't know. But that's two of the things that we've looked at today, that people had collected material about Civil War hot air balloons, and there's no information about who they are and why they were collecting it. Let's see. The French family. Let's see, because this, I want to be a little bit more targeted in how I approach this. Let's see, folder 1. 7 letters from 3 brothers who were soldiers in Company H, 11th New Hampshire Infantry during the American Civil War. All written to family members from various camps and hospitals in Maryland, Kentucky, and Virginia. Shadows of Life coming in on the joke certificate for the Confederate States Air Force, which never existed. Letter from Elias, December 29th, 1862. So there's one of these letters that we want to look at. Okay, let me see here. Hopefully I will be able to read his handwriting. Camp near Fredericksburg, Virginia, December 29th, 1862. Dear sister, in my letter yesterday, I forgot to mention that I wanted some dried I have no idea what that word is. Some dried apple? I don't know what this is. You were here from the start, just in the shadows. He wants some dried something. If you will send some, it would do me a lot of good. We have to pay $8 a bushel for it here, and not very good at that. What? I have no idea what this is. Does anybody? Apple? Possibly. I suppose that's possible. Bushels would make sense. Yeah, I'm gonna. I think you may have it. Cool. Okay. Thank you, Blue Rooster. I want to have you put my things in a box with. I do not. At least not that I'm aware of. Yeah, it does not appear to have a transcription accompanying it. $8 for apples sounds like the same price for today. I want to have you put my things in a box with I have no idea. He has written to told him to get a box at Kohl's and have it all sent together. It won't cost only about half as much as it would to send 2 boxes. I would like to know what kind of weather it is in New Hampshire today. It is fine a day as you saw out here. Still and warm. I can see two balloons, the important part, up in the air from where I am waiting Professor Lowe, or I'm uncertain what this word is. From where I am. Yeah. It scribbles to me. Something Professor Lowe is up looking at the rebels in his, and the other came from the south side of the river, and I think it belongs to the Rebs. It was up very high and going toward Washington. It would take me some time to figure out what that. It's dated a week after the actual battle. It's also interesting, like, he's writing about it and mentions, like, he knows the Union balloon and knows that Professor Lowe is up there. And then the other balloon came up from the other side of the river, the south side of the river. And he assumes that it belongs to the rebels, which we know that the Confederate Army did use balloons. So just really cool that he saw one from each side. I hope you will excuse the shortness of this letter, but the mail is going to leave soon and I must close. Elias French. His handwriting, he just does a little... He occasionally puts in capital letters where it's not necessary, and they're very embellished, and so I'm not processing what they are. I would need, I think, some more samples of his handwriting. It would have taken me forever to figure out that word was apple, had you not figured it out, Blue Rooster. But it definitely is, and it fits with the style when looked at in context with the rest of his handwriting. It's just... It made it somewhat difficult for me. See, now I have a book. But this book happens to be Fanny W. Tinsley Memoirs. The Fanny W. Tinsley memoir. Apparently, page 4 talks about the Union balloon Intrepid. I don't know much about this. Mrs. S.G. Tinsley's war experiences from original manuscript being a civilian's account of the Battle of Mechanicsburg. Do I have an image of the Intrepid in here? Probably. Straight Western. The Intrepid is the one that we've seen inflated multiple times. What? Okay, sorry. I just turned the page to one page further than we had gone before in this book, and... Sorry. Technology. Haven't heard of which one? The Battle of Mechanicsburg? This is the valve of the balloon Enterprise. This is the high technology of the American Civil War period with regard to Air Force. In a couple of weeks, we'll be looking at another cutting edge technology of the American Civil War, submarines. But this is the valve of the USB-C Enterprise. Or the USB Enterprise. I think it would be the USB Enterprise, the US Balloon Enterprise. They're just called the Balloon Enterprise, but it would be the United States Balloon Enterprise. So this is like its warp core. It's so cool. It's so. The Union. Sorry, it'll be blurry while I flip pages, because it always is. Ooh. Brady photograph of complete generating apparatus, showing mobile generator, cooler, force pump, purifier, and couplings. The USB Enterprise sounds like a Star Trek themed memory stick. It does. Ooh, that's cool. Balloon boat, G.W. Park Curtis, with Balloon, Washington, in Ascension near Budd's Ferry, Maryland. It's a freaking aircraft carrier from the American Civil War. Was G.W. Park Custis the first ever aircraft carrier? I must now inquire of the interwebs. G.W. Park Custis, the first ever aircraft carrier. According to the Federal Aviation Administration, the USS George Washington Parke Custis was the first aircraft carrier. World War I is typically considered the first war where the United States deployed aviation forces, but in actuality, the U.S. military began to rely on military aircraft over 50 years before World War I during the American Civil War. Both the Union and Confederacy used hot air balloons for reconnaissance to help determine the location of troops and artillery. Around the same time Lowe proposed his idea of a balloon corps, John LaMontagne, I suppose is how it would be said, but another civilian aeronaut, was also trying to contact the Union Army to provide balloons. However, unlike Lowe, LaMontagne did not have any influential backers. He tried to have an audience with Secretary of War Simon Cameron, but was unsuccessful. He was able to get the attention of Major General Benjamin F. Butler, commander of Union forces at Fort Monroe in Hampton, Virginia. Butler privately contracted with LaMontagne, who arrived at Fort Monroe in July of 1861. Okay. The Union Army Balloon Corps consisted of 7 balloons. The 2 largest were the Union, the original balloon, and Intrepid. Both were 32,000 cubic feet and could carry 5 people in the basket. The Constitution and United States were the second largest, with both at 25,000 cubic feet and a capacity of 3 people. The Washington was 20,000 cubic feet and could carry 2 people. The 2 smallest balloons were the Eagle and Excelsior. Each one was 15,000 cubic feet and could only be operated by a single person. The balloons were purposely colorful and easily visible to intimidate Confederate troops, making them feel as if nearby Union troops were watching them. Okay, but I want specifically... Yes, okay. The balloons were first launched over land and tethered to the ground. There were a few instances where intelligence was gathered from a free flight, but only experts like LaMontagne were capable of doing so. Eventually, the balloons were also able to be launched from the water. Both Lowe and LaMontagne launched balloons from vessels, successfully combining airborne and naval forces, a first in military history. In August of 1861, Lowe built the first aircraft carrier, the USS George Washington Parke Custis, which is what is pictured here. It's very flat. Out of an old coal barge, the Custis was pulled by the USS Stepping Stone, which, if you look back to the previous, the most recent episode of us looking at the journal of Philip Peltz, the chief engineer of the USS Dakota, he talked about the USS Stepping Stone in the section that we just read. That would have been the first Wednesday, so 2 weeks ago, first Wednesday of the month. LaMontagne did not build his own carrier, but he did launch balloons from the USS Fanny and the USS Adriatic in August of 1861. Other barges were converted into aircraft carriers as well. That is spectacular. I didn't even know about the balloons until we were reading the journal of Philip Peltz. And then I didn't know, I had forgotten about submarines. And I was like, oh, we should do that. But I didn't know about the balloons at all. And then I certainly didn't know about the aircraft carriers. I'm looking for a picture of the Intrepid. I found one online, but I was hoping that there'd be one in here. I'm just going to flip a little faster. Here we go. Plus, everything in this book is in black and white, so I'll still show the one from online because it's in color. But balloon Intrepid about to ascend near Vienna, Virginia. From a war correspondence sketch, Lowe collection, U.S. National Museum. But that is what the Intrepid would have actually looked like. The bright yellow. Because as was noted, they were brightly colored because it was thought that that would intimidate the opposing side. And hot air balloons today are also still brightly colored. I wonder if part of the reason they're brightly colored today is because the Civil War balloons were brightly colored. This is so fascinating. All right, page 4. Oh. This is an unpublished manuscript of the eyewitness account of the famous battle at Mechanicsville, Virginia. For pictures of the White House, the Custis Estate, etc., see the fine account in Volume 2 of Battles and Leaders of the Civil War. This is an important manuscript relating to the Civil War. So, unpublished manuscript, but by who? This is the Fanny Tinsley Memoirs. So I presume by Fanny Tinsley. Maybe there's a biographical note in here. There he is! Fanny W. Tinsley was likely Frances William Gaines Tinsley, the daughter of Dr. William F. and James Elizabeth Spindle Gaines. She was born in King William County, Virginia on November 11th, 1836, and in the 1850 federal census, she's listed among the children living in the Hanover, Virginia home of her parents. On May 2nd, 1860, she married Seton G. Tinsley in Hanover County. The 1870 federal census shows the Tinsleys living and farming in Hanover County with 3 Tinsley children. By 1880, the family had added 3 more children, moved to Richmond, and Seton Tinsley had taken a position as a tax collector. Fanny W. Tinsley died in Henrico County, Virginia on January 27, 1921, and was buried in the city's Hollywood Cemetery. Okay, so supposed to be page 4. Let me see what's here. All right. Indeed. So let's see. I'm just going to jump back to the start of this paragraph here so that we get some lead into it. And yes, it's typeset and it's on onion skin, so somewhat difficult to read. Let me. There. Come on. You can do it. There we go. One night, the report went out that Father was a spy and was putting lights in the windows to signal our soldiers. Our men, sharpshooters, were on the opposite hill across the Chickahominy River in Henrico County. We were forbidden to have any lights in the back of the house that overlooked the hills on the other side of the river. One night, Natty was sick, and I was sleeping in the back of the house in a room which overlooked the hills, and I lit a candle to see how to give her some medicine. The guards stayed in the back porch at night, all that were not on duty at the gates, and one of them came and knocked on the window and told me that I must put the light out because he had orders that no lights were to be allowed in the back of the house. I told him that the baby was sick and that I only had the light to see how to give her some medicine and that I would put the light in a closet. He said that would be all right. The guards never made any noise in the night. Every day, the Yankees sent up a balloon called the Intrepid in front of our house to try to see what was going on in Richmond. General Lowe was the man who ascended in the balloon, and he told many wonderful things that he saw going on in Richmond, such as people going to church, the evacuation of Richmond in 1862, wagon trains crossing Mayo's Bridge, etc. There was an old lady, Mrs. Woody, who lived 3 or 4 miles from us, and a balloon was sent up from her house too. When they were telling her what they had seen, she replied, "Yes, Moses also viewed the promised land, but he never entered." That night, the church which she attended, and which was on a corner of her place, was burned by the Yankees. Then the report got out that Mr. Tinsley and his brother were at home, and a body of men was sent to search the house. Mother went upstairs with them. They looked like they were scared to death when they got up there. They poked their heads into the doors like they thought somebody was going to shoot them. Mother told them that was not the way to search the house, that they must come in and search because she had closets, and they must come in and look good, that they would not know who she had hid in the closets. But they would just open the doors and peep in, and she would say, "You haven't looked into that closet good." But they again said that they were satisfied, and Mother said that she was not. Mother thought the guards thought that she was going to trap them, or that something was going to happen to them. One day I saw our men on the other hill, and I took Hattie and went down into the garden with her, thinking that perhaps Mr. Tinsley might be over there. He very often rode over there in the evening, and that he could see that we were at home. The guard was at the garden gate, and I told him what I was going to do, and that I was not going to run away, and that he could watch me if he chose. He said he was not afraid of my running away, and when I came back, I told him I had not seen anybody over there that evening. General Porter was quartermaster in the Yankee Army. He was very kind to Father and used to come and bring him the papers every morning. The officer in charge of the guard took his meals with us every day. Mother used to ask him to come every day. When Sister left Fairfield, she left all of her furniture there. She went up to Charlotte during the war. General Porter came down one day and reported to Father that the furniture was being taken out of the house and destroyed, and said that he couldn't prevent it and wanted to know if he, Father, could not have it brought down home. Father told him that he had no control over the black people over there, but that he would try to have it moved. He got a boy to go up after it in an ox cart. The boy brought one load, and that was all he brought. I'm going to stop there because we've moved past the reference to the balloons, and that was the point of looking at this. But this is actually quite an interesting little account, and written nicely. I wonder when it was written. Signed Fanny W. Tinsley, Richmond, Virginia, January 6th, 1912. Which is why it ends up, like, why it was possible for it to be typeset on onion skin is 1912. Whereas, 50 years earlier, during the Civil War, it would have been handwritten. Anyway, we basically have looked at all of the things that were pulled for us to look at today, and we discovered aircraft carriers that I didn't know existed. This was thrilling. I love that. Just looking through it, like, I knew it was going to be about balloons because that's what we looked for. I had no idea that there were aircraft carriers in the American Civil War. So that's Air Force, because the U.S. Balloon Corps, not the first, the French Revolution had the first military balloons, but Air Force. The Confederate forces had the first submarine to successfully sink an enemy ship in battle. And then apparently the Union Army had the very first aircraft carrier. Just, wow. This super, super cool. I love this. I love that we get to discover this stuff together. And without this show and without you showing up to watch it, I would never really have a reason to look at any of this material. So thank you. And hopefully you also find it fun and informative. Let me see what's coming up. Next Wednesday, we will have a selection from the Heron Speculative Fiction Collection. This time, we are focused on a story titled Conan, Man of Destiny. So next week, we will dive into the entire idea of Conan the Barbarian, which I don't know a ton about. So it'll be interesting to learn. And we'll glance at that story, Conan, Man of Destiny. And then 2 weeks from today, the CSS Hunley, which is the aforementioned submarine. And then the week after that, we're going to go back and revisit the Hauser Institute of New York, which was one of the things with questionable nutrition guidance that read sort of like patent medicine, but also started to move towards actual nutritional science. And it was really fascinating before, and there's more to that collection. So we're gonna revisit it. Yeah, so more to come. Like I said, hopefully you all had fun today and learned things. I know I did. Let me see about where we're gonna raid. I have thoughts. I know Stephen Joyce is on, so that's an option. He's doing unforeseen incidents. Oh, but that's definitely an option. Come on. All right, so there's the aviary cam at the aquarium. Oh. You know, we're going to continue with something educational. And we're going to head over to N-Simplex Pachinko for some differential equations, which seems intimidating to me. But yeah, we're going to go watch some maths happen. So I'm going to go ahead and set up the raid over to N-Simplex Pachinko. And we'll pop in over there. Thank you all very, very much for joining me today. I will be back for more Archival Adventures a week from today, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, both twitch.tv/VTUL Studios and twitch.tv/Rogan27. If you want to drop in on me playing video games, right now, it's just Monday nights on twitch.tv/Rogan27, 7 p.m. Eastern. The schedule information is on the About page or the schedule page of that channel. Thank you all very much for joining me today. I hope that I will see you all again. Until I do, keep exploring history, everybody.